Hey, welcome to the Disformed Podcast. My name is Gerad Hall. I'm here with my co-host, Josiah Lorenzen. I'm the Dispy. He's the Reformed, making the Disformed. And today we are joined by a special guest. Josiah, would you introduce our guest?
Yeah, you know what? I don't even think I can properly introduce you because I don't know your last name. What's your last name, Torry?
Yeah, Slater.
Torry Slater. Yeah, so Torry came into the church, a couple months ago? And he's been coming to my small group at my house.
Okay.
And he's got a really interesting passion. And I've been watching him on TikTok. He's got a pretty big TikTok following. You do a lot of debates on there and lives on there.
All right.
Yeah, so I thought it'd be really interesting to get him on here and just kind of talk about this topic specifically.
Okay. And what's the topic?
Man, you know what's funny about this?
What's funny about it?
I was thinking about it on the way over here is I get nervous talking about this topic.
Okay.
Because of the way that culture, like if you say the wrong thing on accident, you immediately get labeled a racist or whatever. So it's really hard to have the conversation.
I'm super pumped then. Yeah. Anything that makes you uncomfortable, I'm all about it. That's going to be so good.
But
all right. So what's the topic?
In my words, I would say the topic is race as a social construct.
Correct.
That's kind of what your passion is.
Well, dismantling the social construct of race, but technically it's called the social hierarchy of race.
Social hierarchy. Can you break that down for me?
Yeah, so social hierarchy of race was started by Johann Blumenbach. He was a German anthropologist, and he started his first piece, I should say, in 1776. Then he issued his third version of it in 1799. And with the social hierarchy of race, basically just breaks it down to, at the bottom of it is the Negroid. And because the cranial structures were different from the other ones, he basically said that this is at the bottom. Basically alluding to the point that the Negroid is mentally destitute, therefore inferior in comparison to the other types.
And so you're saying that's where the whole race idea came from?
Correct.
That we classify these people because of their skin color?
Correct.
So what got you onto this? Take us on the journey.
Yeah, just a little backstory. So I am Torry Gerad Slater on social media. I ministry graduate, became a recovery coach, and that's where I tapped into my passion for people and mentoring, but also to remain authentic during the entire process, but under the Christian lens, right?
Yeah.
As far as recovery, then became a peer recovery specialist. And then I went on to basically go from a peer recovery specialist to a sales development rep, business development rep, double credential in the computer software sales industry. And there is where I basically found my passion a little bit more, and I started to accelerate it and basically just become more laser focused on now making a cultural difference. And what basically stemmed, or I should say piqued my interest in this subject in particular, is that whenever I would talk about something that is a societal ill with other people,
right?
Race was always the underlying theme. And it seemed everything would stem from race. Yeah, a key example. So I like to just basically keep everything simplified. I believe there are different ideologies. I subscribe to the Christian conservative ideology worldview, and you have people who are outside of that paradigm.
Sure.
And so with the people who are usually outside of that paradigm, the social hierarchy or the social construct of race is always their go-to because they live their entire existence through this lens.
Sure.
Right? And so I say it's a lack of a paradigm because it erodes critical thinking skills. And so usually, since now you view your entire life through this paradigm, everything has to stem from this paradigm. Therefore, it's always the underlying issue comes to race.
Right.
Yep, absolutely.
And so then what got you to where you're doing TikTok and discussing
so to piggyback on where I left off before, and so after I became an SDR, I started to get a little bit more passionate about being more of a conservative activist and more focused on covertly now planting the seeds of Christ into people who I have civil discourse with.
Yeah.
And with the social construct of race, I started to notice its power. And its power is demonic. It's a Luciferian construct. And usually when you talk to a person who lives their entire existence through this societal construct, I came to the realization there's always some kind of a resentment, some bitterness, some vitriol that can be attached to it with this hatred. And it's misplaced because with this social construct of race, by default, you are dehumanizing an individual. You're not seeing their intrinsic value.
Right.
And it violates the tenets of Christianity because we all are beautifully and wonderfully made. And God has always played he has always played the main role in the conception of life, right? And so when you're dehumanizing the person, you're stripping them of their intrinsic value, but also their individual value, and completely disregarding their individuality.
Right.
And it's very dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then what got you to where you were going, you're like, okay, not only are you interested in it and you studied on it, but now you're going to start engaging in civil discourse through social media like TikTok?
Yeah, it's been a very interesting journey. Because after I left the computer software sales industry, I got involved in politics. So I became a chairman and delegate for my district back in Minnesota for the GOP. Also became the state director of Blexit, Minnesota. So I worked for Candace Owens and Brandon Tatum. Yeah. But then also was a member of the Trump campaign team as well, too. And that really just helped me to garner more, I should say, notoriety, but also recognition. And it drew a lot of people to my Facebook. That's where it started initially, because I did a Breitbart interview in Tulsa, Oklahoma. About the ideology that is usually behind a lot of these political agendas that divide people based on the social construct of race, and how a lot of people are using this to psychologically, emotionally manipulate, gaslight, fearmonger, and etc.
So when you hear someone like Josiah start out by saying that this conversation makes him a little bit nervous, what are your thoughts on that? That's
his intended purpose. It is, so it's called a conversation stopper, right? One of the things to have proper civil discourse would be you start from a mutual mental frameworking. But if you're labeling someone a racist instantly, that person is a Jordan begrudge, and then you're shutting down all conversation, and there's no critical thinking that's ever going to be espoused, because you have already written this person off.
You've already put them into this category, and so therefore anything else that they say doesn't need to be considered.
Null and void, correct. Exactly.
Exactly.
So it's a conversation started from the start.
So how do you encourage somebody who feels this way?
I always say to be a nonconformist.
Nonconformist.
Because this is indicative of the PC movement. The PC movement basically put on a mental but also a verbal gag on society. And it says, I want you to comply. And the way that I want you to comply is to bow down to PC culture, so therefore you are complicit with the indirect, unattended censorship of the masses.
Which essentially eliminates free speech.
Exactly.
And so as we get into this conversation, what do you feel like has been the most helpful thing for people to hear to start to break them out of this mode of thinking?
That's why my heroes such as Candace Owens, Brandon Tatum, Larry Elder, Thomas Sowell, Charlie Kirk, it is about going out there being a bold, insatiable maverick, because I have always been striving for the slow restoration of our constitutional republic by basically holding our country accountable to our founding documents, the principles, the virtues of it. And I believe as a country, we have lost the essence of that. And I don't care who you are. My favorite historian is David Barton and Dr. Richard Green of Wall Builders, and they always bring receipts for everything because I'm a logical thinker, right? And so I believe that one of the biggest things that has been extremely problematic with our country is that we have had historical revisionism that has been inserted in our teaching and in academia, which I have learned that if you can basically rewrite history, you can control the future.
Because you control the narrative.
Exactly.
So what would you say is like a couple of examples of where the greatest injustices have been made in the revisionist history?
Oh, well, wow. I mean, that's a very loaded question because there's so many. But I will say primarily this: it's always been a concerted effort ever since the late 1700s to strip Americans of their identity as an American. Part of your identity as being an American is rooted in our founding documents. Those founding documents are inspired by Christian virtues, principles, morals, and ethics.
Right.
So for your key example, the epitome of this, a clear illustration would be the godless Constitution that was actually published by two professors with no footnotes.
Right.
It doesn't meet academic standard, and they make a lot of bold claims that our founding fathers were just theists. No, they were not. The prevailing sentiment at that time, we had over 250 founding fathers. Majority of them were diametrically opposed to slavery.
Right.
13 of them owned slaves, but majority of those 13 that owned slaves didn't like the practice of slavery. That's why they practiced the slaves. Owning slaves, because they wanted to treat them in a humane way versus the opposite. Right. One of those people would be George Washington.
Yeah.
He did not treat his slaves as slaves.
In terms of like treating them as property as opposed they would treat them as people, or what would be, maybe a biblical term of like bond servant, something like that.
So can I interject and just ask a practical question?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So your view on the founding of the country, would it be less racist than the narrative that we hear all the time?
Exactly, yeah. So basically where this accelerated indoctrination inserted with the historical revisionism is accelerated with CRT, critical race theory, right? And so they say, well, it's only being taught in college and it's an elective course and all that kind of stuff, but it doesn't negate the fact that its derivatives are actually being taught in junior high and elementary. Right. And those derivatives would be equity, or they call it equality, or some other things like that, right? But would just basically alludes to the point now in CRT that America was founded upon white supremacy. So I say, well, let's tackle this. Is that true or not? Because the social construct of race wasn't around then when the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. Right. And they came with our first governing document on the Mayflower, was the Mayflower Compact, which that is the document that actually led to the drafting of our Declaration of Independence and the United States Constitution. Right. And that was a hardcore Christian document.
Right. I mean, religious freedom is, what
exactly
set the course for them to make the journey here.
So, but it's interesting because they say it was founded upon white supremacy. The Puritans didn't own slaves. They didn't impress anyone. Right. So when they got here, they were led by a Native American had already been to Great Britain and spoke English. That led them to an abandoned encampment and taught them how to cultivate and build. And that led to the first Thanksgiving. No one was being oppressed. No one was being slaughtered. Right. There's a difference between a settler and colonization.
Yes.
They were settlers.
Yeah. That's good. What are you thinking?
I have all kinds of thoughts. Well, I don't even know which direction to take this because maybe a vulnerable story, because I feel like I was caught on the other side of this early. So not early, but so you remember George Floyd?
Correct.
George Floyd happened, and dude, I took that. I don't know if I want to say took the bait, but I fell into that narrative super hard.
I remember.
You remember this?
I remember this.
And if I look back, I mean, probably one of the most powerful sermons I've ever preached. I'm embarrassed of it.
Okay.
Because I came out basically with a message, because that video was disturbing. Sure. And it emotionally moved you if you watched it. And of course, you're reading all the headlines and you're saying, okay, there's an issue here, right?
Right.
Without me looking into the actual facts, which I've done later, right?
Yeah, and some of which were hard to some of it was harder to access until the court records were available. That,
right. But I also think that the media was more trusted at that time than it is now.
Oh, sure.
Correct.
I mean, the media. If you go back to February 2020, everyone trusted what came out of the media. Yeah. By the end of 2020, everything is starting to be questioned.
Right. Well, so much of the media was pushing this headline of the injustice that was done to George Floyd. So I look at that. I start reading some books. I read a book by Mason. You remember the Woke Church?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Eric Mason.
Mason, Woke Church. I read that book, and I started to just become convicted about, because if you frame it this way, all people, and this is a theological statement, right? We obviously prefer our own people. There's a preference there.
Through our own culture, yeah.
Prefer your own culture.
Yeah. Would you say that's more fair to say in terms of how people tend to operate in terms of?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarities with tribalism.
Yeah.
But then again, a culture transcends even tribalism.
Right.
So,
right.
But I painted it as intrinsic racism.
Sure. Yeah.
Like, okay, I've noticed this in myself. Like, when I hang out with people, I want to hang out with my family and my group of friends. And I notice that I don't love everything about the sub-black culture. Right. And so I'm like, I'm a racist.
Right. Yeah.
Right. Because you're seeing all this headline in the media and stuff. And then I get up and
well, if you're told enough times that you're a racist,
I started to believe it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
And so I would go around, and I was honestly, it's one of the stains I feel like on my pastoral. But it was early.
You were young, bro.
Young, first year.
Yeah, you were. Yeah. I mean, I remember you telling me that I was a racist.
I thought everybody was just intrinsically racist. It was just part of the nature of fall of man.
Which was news to me. I was like, oh, well, thank you, Josiah. I needed another white man to tell me that I was a racist. Thank you. Yeah.
But, man, and then, so I did that. I preached that sermon, and slowly over time, I kept reading, kept learning, and I was like, wait a minute. I've got this backwards.
So what were you reading that was starting to help elicit a different viewpoint than what you had?
Oh, gosh. You want me to get into authors, or do you want to get me into...
Just, I mean...
Well, what caused the paradigm shift?
Yeah, exactly.
That it wasn't working. Because what I saw was there's a disparagement. We've always known this data of income levels, right, between the white and black culture in America. And that bothered me because I don't want that. I want to figure out why there's this much crime in Chicago. I want to know what are these problems?
Yeah.
And so I initially believed, it's a racism problem, right? We go in.
Right. So systemic racism starts to make sense to you where you're going, this is why this is how we got here. I got
Something's off.
Yeah. Right.
And then I started.
And it's baked into the system.
Right.
Got it.
And so that was the passion behind it. I'm like, I want to solve this issue. Like, I want our church to be like a multicultural church, and I want to go after this, and I want to fix this problem. Right. And the way to fix that problem is I'll admit we're racist, and then we can move forward and fix this.
Right. Yeah.
That was really what I thought.
Because I think your conflation of your theological basis of the necessity of repentance was the only pathway towards redemption.
Yep.
And that in order to heal in this area, you needed to be able to repent of where your sin was.
You just reminded me, I read a book by Fleming Rutledge called The Crucifixion that had a big impact on me. One of the most beautiful written books on the cross I've ever read, but she has a pretty significant piece in there on race.
Yeah.
And on corporate repentance.
Right.
And on the Bible in situations where they actually did repent for the sins of their forefathers.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so I'm like, okay. Well, like, we need to be the generation that repents for what they did and now fix this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
And again, kept reading and realizing, like, this isn't working. I feel like everyone's becoming more racist. The melanated culture is becoming more racist towards the white culture and vice versa. I'm like, this isn't helping. Like, there's something not right about this.
Right. Like, it was not just lines now there's walls, right?
I used to have black friends, and I never really thought that much about this stuff.
Right.
And now it's like, there was like a tension between every black person I came in contact with.
Yeah.
And so it started to not sit right. And so I kept reading. And at the end of the day, I've kind of landed on, I think all people are sinful.
Yeah.
On both sides. And I think that there's parts of, if you want to call it white culture, I don't know if you'd use that phrase.
No.
You'd use American culture.
Correct.
Would you say it's a white subculture of American culture?
No.
That's what I'm asking. See? Don't get off. What would you call it? Just blank American culture?
American culture. Yep.
Okay.
We are, and we are a melting pot, and that's the way that Christ wanted it, right? And
then what do you call the culture, though? For instance, like, you're wearing...
Which one in particular?
Like, your melanated culture.
So it'd be urban, right? So I'm more urban
culture. Okay.
Or you have suburbanite, rural, etc. You know, those would be accurate because the thing is, it's so nothing should ever be predicated upon someone's skin tone, right?
Yep. Okay.
But location is definitely something that's irrefutable. Okay, yeah. So you grew up in suburbia. Okay, so you're a suburbanite. You grew up in the inner city. You're urban.
Which would go along with the biblical paradigm of how they categorize people.
Correct.
Yeah, and I think music can have subcultures to it, right? That's going to influence things, right? Obviously, religion is going to have subcultures that come with it. And then within Christianity, you would have denominational subcultures that would happen within it and so forth. Yeah.
But even this is new to me because I feel like I've been slapped in the face with people telling me that if I don't say black culture and I don't label it as black, then I'm not seeing them for who they are, and that in itself is racist, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing
Correct.
how much I've been formed by all of this stuff coming at me.
Yeah.
It's normal.
It is.
You know, like it's normal to be formed by what's coming at you. You know.
Are you saying that facetiously, or
No, I'm serious. Yeah, like I think your experience is a normative experience.
It is.
Yeah.
It is for most light-skinned Americans because in school, in academia right now, they're teaching, and all these are synonymous, right? So if you have white privilege, right, you're entitled to white guilt. Because of white guilt, you're entitled to white fragility. Mm-hmm. Because of white fragility, you're entitled also to white tears. And so white tears, as they say, it is a psychological manipulation tactic to completely distract from taking accountability for what your ancestors done, so that way you don't have to deal with accountability, and therefore you paint yourself as the victim. Yeah. All this is going on in academia right now. And see, this is not academia. This is an indoctrination. This is an agenda. College should be about academics and arithmetic. What's with a racially based agenda, rhetoric, or anything like that?
Yeah. So Torry, how would you say we got from Johann writing in the late 1700s in Germany to higher education in the United States fully bought in?
Yeah. So I can
walk us kind of broad brushstroke.
Yeah, I'll expedite it and just do this extrapolation, right? So a lot of people do not know that Anthony Johnson was technically the first person to own a slave, and he owned John Castor, who was technically the first slave, and Anthony Johnson and John Castor both were melanated, right? Yeah. And so stemming from that, what
Can
also...
I just pause and say that melanated means black?
Correct.
Because most people listening, I don't think they'll catch on to that.
Yeah, and so... And so with my base, we do not refer to the social construct of race, but just to be colloquial, right?
So from here forward, we're saying melanated.
And so, no, you don't have to. No, you don't have to.
Josiah's mother's the only person who listens to the podcast, so that's why he knew to bring that up. So
yeah, you don't have to, but just stemming from that, so that set
Terry,
the precedent for chattel slavery was with Anthony Johnson, a melanated person, so that defeats the purpose that slavery was predicated upon race, because it was actually a melanated person who was technically the first slave owner, right?
Right. Now, within the United States, right?
Correct.
Because we're also
correct.
It's important to acknowledge the widespread practice of slavery throughout all of
but also too
recorded human history,
right? But also too, just more historical, facts, right? So you had basically, if you want to say, the first people to actually practice slavery were melanated people, because they migrated from Africa to Mesopotamia.
Yes,
right. Transatlantic slave trade, the largest slave enterprises were all African owners and African dynasties, right? And so they sold the slaves to the Dutch, Portuguese, and the Spanish, and only 300,000 slaves actually came to the United States, the majority going to South America, right?
Right.
So the thing is just with the social construct of Johann Blumenbach, after Anthony Johnson and then the chattel slavery, now it started to be predicated. It went from being classism now to basically racism,
right?
Because even in the Deep South, you had 3,775 slave owners that owned over 12,000 slaves. And even before that, though, the first official slaves in the United States all came from Great Britain, which is a good book called White Cargo. And so slavery was all about classism, has always been, until we get to the United States. And right now, in a societal context here in the United States, ever since that, everyone has said now that slavery has been predicated upon race, which is also predicated upon white supremacy. Therefore, America was founded upon white supremacy, and it's just categorically false.
Right. And so from one of my understandings, Johann had a big influence on what happened with Jews in Germany in the Holocaust, right?
Correct.
And then that post-World War II, we had an influx of German intellectuals begin to teach in the United States and bring some of this into our education system in the late 1940s and 1950s. Does that square away with where you've read and studied on this topic?
No, it does. I always say that birds of the same feather flock together. So this is just basically how I have an umbrella terminology for everything that we're basically talking about. I call it leftism.
Yeah.
Right? Just basically secular humanism and all this kind of stuff. The thing is that, as I alluded to before previously, late 1700s, we have had this concerted effort by radical atheism to destroy the United States from within by destroying what we're truly founded upon, and that is Christ. A lot of people do not know that the reason why they were so hostile is because our founding fathers gave this country to Christ. And each of our founding fathers, who are actually influential, as I should say, as far as the drafting of our documents and all that kind of stuff, participated in war, who are actually representatives of their colonies, all of them, whenever they gave a public declaration or proclamation, they always signed off in the year of our Lord Jesus Christ, right? And so with us straying away from what we're founded on, right, because we know in Christ, there's no Jew or there's no Gentile. All walls of hostility have been torn down. Christ has died for all sins of humanity. So why are we apologizing for sins that our ancestors may have done? A lot of people have to understand this, that when slavery was being practiced, even at the height, right in the 1800s, went from 300,000 during the entire time the slavery was being practiced here to 10,000 slaves, right? We ended up around 400,000 slave owners in its totality here in the United States. 3% of light-skinned Americans owned slaves. But they paint the picture that majority of light-skinned Americans owned slaves. That's not the case. And so this is the historical revisionism that goes along with the concerted effort, as I was talking about, eroding truth, creating your own version of history so that this way you can control the future. Because as you look at the populace now who are being indoctrinated in academia, it's a lot of people who subscribe to this leftist ideology.
100%. Yeah. That seems to go hand in hand with the education. So what is some practical steps if someone's listening and they're feeling like Josiah was feeling, and this is challenging that thought process? Where do you go from here if you've kind of been carrying around this guilt and seeing the world through this paradigm? Yeah.
And of course, this kind of is going to be kind of hard because it's going to have to be subjective reconciliation. Okay. Right. Yeah. And so I always say that the best way to destroy a lie is the truth. And so I always say, study Thomas Sowell. Look into a Walter Williams. Look into Dr. David Barton and Richard Green of Wall Builders. They give you the correct narrative because they actually have receipts for each and every claim that they actually make. Yeah. Versus what's going on and what's common in today's society, where you can make a claim and people do not demand evidence for it. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So that would be the best approach, I would say.
So just to play devil's advocate, I mean, racism does exist.
Correct.
On both sides.
Correct.
But you just don't think it's as prevalent as people say it is.
Well, it's so two things can coexist, right, at the same time, right? I believe just the very subscribing to the social construct of race makes you complicit. And I hate to say that, but it's true. It's not substantiated by science. Science says that there's only one race, and it's Homo sapien. Science also says that we all have the Eve gene, and where the Bible says we originate from, science also substantiates that as well too. And the Bible also says we have common ancestry, which is also substantiated by science, which is so awesome, right? So here's the thing, is that if you do not want to be complicit in reinforcing, or basically to be guilty of doing what this social construct of social hierarchy of race is intended to do, stop subscribing to it. Do not identify with it anymore and view people as people, because it teaches you to look at a person just basically on the surface. How can you say you truly value someone if everything that you view about this person is on the surface instead of getting to the core of who that individual is? Yeah, so I've been guilty of it myself, but that's why I like to do my due diligence. I'm commanded to do my due diligence. I am a Christian, and it is my primary objective to expose evil wherever I find it. And just right now, Satan's strongest weapon is the social construct of race.
Okay, so a little bit more devil's advocate. Talk to me about stereotyping. I mean, do you think that's a fundamental characteristic of just the human experience?
Yeah,
stereotyping. And is stereotyping racist?
That depends. There's nuances, right? Is there some accuracy to stereotyping? Yeah. Unfortunately, it actually is, right? But here's the thing, though, right? To be observant or to acknowledge what is actually reality, trends. Are those trends dictated by someone's skin color? No. Is it more nature versus nurture that dictates these trends? Yeah. Data would substantiate that. So the very fact that social construct of race does not exist, because if it was actually real and it dictated someone's actions and also the way that they, their ideology, everyone will act a exact
so you're
certain
saying it's
way.
More nurture than nature.
It's correct. And so the remedy is definitely spiritual, but also.
Well, because what he's saying is that by prescribing to this social construct is a nurturing habit, right? And so that the only way to break it is by stopping to prescribe.
Yeah. I guess I'm just trying to think through a lens of, I have other black friends that will listen to this and will be like, I know what they're thinking.
What are they thinking?
Well, in terms of stereotyping, right? It's very common for, I don't want to subscribe to but for non-melanated people, light-skinned people, right? To say, hey, they're this and this is what they do, right?
Yeah.
Stereotype an entire people
Give me
group.
an example.
Well, that's kind of awkward.
Well, I mean, you're saying that you know what they're thinking, so.
Yeah, there's parts of urban, let's call it that. There's parts of urban culture. Look at you, you're over there watching me squeal. You're watching me wiggle right now. Yeah, you're enjoying this. Yeah, you love to watch me wiggle. I am uncomfortable.
You're doing great. I'm really proud of you.
I'm telling you what I grew up in, right? I grew up in rural Long Grove.
Yep.
We had 2 melanated people in my school.
Right.
Okay. And our experience with urban culture is that, not super hardworking, right? Typically lower income.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be honest, I was scared of melanated people growing up because my only experience with them were in the inner city of Minneapolis.
Okay.
And my dad owned rental properties, and one time they came up and beat on the windows and was like yelling at my mom. I had very little experience, and that was my only experience.
So you had such limited exposure,
yeah.
right?
So it painted a narrative in my head, right?
Right.
Where I kind of threw a blanket on, like, hey, be careful. You might meet some that are good, but be careful because it's, you know what I'm saying?
So you had like a built-in caution.
Built-in caution.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where I wrestle with this. Like, well, how much of that is racism and how much of that is just natural? That's what humans do, is we pick out trends and that's what I wanted to hear from you. Like, how do you process that? Through my lens. Like, how would you process that? So the white rural guy, you know what I mean?
I mean, it's just not even just with light-skinned community. You just say America as whole. And so one of my rules on my debate platform is no anecdotals. The reason why I say no anecdotals, because your subjective experience has no bearing on the overall objective. Okay. Right? The objective truth, right? Because one of the things that, I'm not saying that what you said initially is fundamentally flawed. It's just the process that comes from having an anecdotal experience that makes it flawed because you're not processing it correctly what actually happened to you, right? Yeah. So you have this group of individuals, they did something that's unfavorable, but you say, hey, this is a characteristic of that entire group that looks like them. That's what makes it flawed, and that's why anecdotals are so dangerous, right? Because that subjective experience, now a lot of people, they will say, that's all of America because I had this one experience and it was not a great experience. So therefore that's all of America. And see, this is the fundamental flaw with America entirely, with a lot of people who subscribe to the social construct. Because if you're already viewing life through a social construct of black, white, and this is happening to me because I'm black or because I'm white, you're going to view all of America that way, and it's a very, very, very terrible misinterpretation.
So you're
of
almost
America.
becoming racist because you're subscribing to the construct.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying the first step is to not allow yourself to
partake in that
obey the construct anymore, right?
Yeah.
Which I think is, by and large, I don't think the general populace is aware of the presuppositions that they operate with, right?
Yeah.
Like, this is not something that people are typically spending their time thinking about or realizing is what's the worldview with which I operate with. And so,
you know what's interesting? So I was just unpacking this before I came here, and we were talking about why is it important that prejudice is the first word in the definition of racism, because prejudice starts in your mind, right? And it's a presupposition, right? Or a preconceived notion that is rooted on no evidence or a lack of experience.
Yeah, right.
Right?
Yep. Yeah.
And so it starts in the mind.
This is where I think, sorry, jump in.
Go ahead.
I think that a lot of people have conflated the two, like a lack of experience and racism, right? Which is, I think the conversation I tried having with you 5 years ago was that you may not actually be a racist because you have.
No, trust me, bro, I was. I'm just joking.
Maybe at one point, but at least at the point I met you, you weren't. And but that your lack of exposure had created an ignorance, and then that reinforces the construct that you had unknowingly accepted.
Can I tell you what else reinforced it?
Yeah, what's that?
Is I had somewhat intelligent black friends in my life that were praising me because I was taking that stance.
Tell me more.
They were like, finally, a white guy that gets it.
Yeah.
He's admitting he's racist, and so now he's one of the good ones because he's done that.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, okay, I'm seeing the wall come down. Now I'm their friend, right? Right. Now I'm one of the good guys.
Yeah, because they're like, you get it.
Yeah.
Because you see it.
Yeah.
Which is the whole idea of being woke, right? Is you wake up to that. Yes.
Yeah.
But that's and that's what we focus on. That's why I'm so hyper focused on destroying the social construct, because it is to your detriment and their detriment.
Right.
So one thing that
because it doesn't provide a solution.
Exactly. And this it's counterintuitive and counterproductive, because it is counterintuitive, right? And so this is what happens, is that with this ideology and a person that lives their entire existence of the social construct, it makes a person a narcissist. And I don't know if you noticed, but a lot of people, they're very self-absorbed. Everything's about me. Yeah. And you go from being a narcissist to a malignant narcissist now. Now you're a threat to your entire community. And what you're alluding to, that's what they call white guilt. And it's a psychological manipulation tactic. And I always tell people, listen, if you are a Christian, are you going to sit up here and answer for the crimes of something you have never, ever done? Does that sound just to you? And most likely, since 3% of light-skinned Americans own slaves, most likely you do not have any ties whatsoever,
right,
or ancestral ties to people practicing slavery.
Which I always thought was one of the better parts of the argument. It's like, well, okay, but we're also not taking into consideration all of the light-skinned people who were doing the work of abolishing slavery, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's like, do they get reparations then too? If they, like, it's just the logic kind of falls apart once you put it under a microscope. But have you looked at all into like William Wilberforce and some of his work as
say the name one more time?
William Wilberforce?
No, I haven't.
So this would be good for you. So he was Christian who was the leader of the abolitionist movement in England, and so who actually, the UK ended slavery before the United States. But Wilberforce, very devout believer, and played a pivotal role in that. That'd be a good person.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
Check out.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
That's all.
But this is a subject, and I'm glad you did mention that you were completely uncomfortable. That's because right now we are fighting against the kingdom of darkness. This social construct of race, I believe that it does lead to mental stagnation to a certain extent, because it does erode critical thinking skills, then everything becomes emotionalism. And that's where the manipulation starts to come into place. And that's where basically now you're starting to be gaslit. Oh, if you do not accept that I am a victim, as they claim, you are therefore guilty of racism because you're not acknowledging my victimhood that's predicated upon my race.
Right.
Yeah, I see that happen a lot.
Yeah. And that race does not belong in a spiritual church.
It's not
because we're spiritual. Right. And when you get to heaven, Christ is not going to sit up there and say, well, oh yeah, your name is in the Lamb's Book of Life because you were a good quote unquote white person, black person, or etc. Nope. We're all covered in the blood of Christ. And so that's all that matters.
Yeah, that's good. Other thoughts you've had as you're preparing for this conversation?
Yeah, I guess I'd like to know what your solution looks like. I understand getting rid of the constructs, right? But like I talked about earlier, when you have the disparagement of income.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I can easily refute that.
Yeah, I want to hear something on that. Like, what does that look like?
So, I mean, I always tell people to fact check me. So when you look into the melanated community are the biggest consumers in the United States. So the money is not a problem. What the problem is just due to their ideology that makes them support the policies that they actually support. They vote for the representatives that they get. So therefore, there's a lack of financial literacy. One of the quickest ways to accrue generational wealth, which I already have done already at a young age, is that I have generational wealth already for my future children, and that's a universal life insurance policy. And I always say that if you can buy Jordans, you can buy rims, you can buy a nice expensive car, and you can be on Section 8, or you can be on some kind of government assistance or whatever, you can get generational wealth through a universal life insurance policy. That's smart investing. Majority of the melanated community does not invest smartly. And so it's not a huge wage gap, as I should say, or just say with generational wealth, there's no huge disparity there because only 30% of light-skinned Americans have generational wealth. It doesn't mean it automatically constitutes to a huge sum of money. It can be a trinket or anything like that that's considered some kind of generational wealth, where there's around 20% for the melanated community. But then again, when you actually when you look at the stats, so the melanated community is 13% of the population, or 13.1% of the population. The light-skinned community, they're a little bit, now it's going down drastically, but let's just say 60%, okay? With over 212 million light-skinned Americans, and you got around 41% of melanated Americans, you cannot expect the 41% to have the same outcome as the majority. That's just not being realistic whatsoever, right?
Why?
Because so when you have the majority, right? The majority is going to own majority of the companies because they are the majority. It has nothing to do with race. And if the melanated community wanted to basically boost the numbers in the melanated community, we have to do with what are the truest forms of systemic and systematic racism, which would be the Democratic apparatus and also Planned Parenthood. Because both of those entities or organizations, apparatuses, were created by white supremacists with the intended purpose to eradicate the melanated community.
I agree.
23 million melanated babies have been aborted ever since the 70s.
Right.
Can you imagine those 23 million being added to the overall population of the melanated community?
Yeah. And so, like in the book, Bridges Out of Poverty, if you remember me recommending that to you, one of the things it talks about is that culturally that there's these unwritten rules that everybody plays by of how they relate to finances. And that a lot of people think that it's about opportunity, but it's really about, well, how do you culturally view this resource of money and what should you do with it when you have it, right? And so for some, there's a poverty culture that when you get it, you spend it because you don't know where it's coming from again. And then there's a middle income class of how they use it, which is usually in short-term advancement and poor investments. And then you have high wealth, which is usually from inheritance, but not strictly, but it's usually because their culture is that you make money work for you, and then you have these long-term investments, right? And so, but that has nothing to do with the color of your skin.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
It has to do with the culture of how you relate to finances and resources.
There's always a fact that I really love to espouse. When a lot of people say, well, but the disparity, it's predicated upon race. And I'm just like, no, it's not, because the Asian community per capita debunks that.
Right.
No one is more successful than the Asian community in the United States in every statistic and attribute across the board. One of the things that's not prevalent in their community is an acute victimhood mentality. There's no excuses. And two-parent household, because, for instance, let's entertain this, right? So let's use some more historical facts, right, and evidence. So when the melanated community were actually set free, right, the Freedmen's Bureau was implemented. They said, we're not going to give you handouts. We're going to teach you how to farm, cultivate, and basically give you literacy, right? And so under great systemic and systematic racism and dealing with the true domestic terrorist group, right, that was formed by the Democrats was a Triple K. Nathan Forrest Bradford, he was a prominent Democrat and founded the KKK, right? And so the thing is that they were terrorizing the melanated communities. The melanated community just got out of the plantation, and now they became congressmen, business owners, and also farmers. So they had wealth. And you have to remember now that the single parent rate in the 1900s was at 8.2% at the time. So the melanated community, even slavery couldn't break up the family, right? And so what's really interesting is that 1916, the Great Migration, the only people who switched parties, there was no party switch. The only people who switched parties were the melanated community, because they voted 100% conservative. They thrived. God was the head of the house. So therefore was the father, so everything was structured, right? 1916, the Great Migration, they accepted the brand new deal, which was welfare. Right. And they were placed in the cities where they are today, and they switched their ideology for government intervention, the leftist ideology, embracing leftist practices that are inimical towards progression. And so we know that now the single parent rate in some districts across the United States is over 80%. But hovers around 75, 80%. And we know that according to the statistics that a child is 4 times more likely not to succeed, but 4 times more likely to go to prison being raised in a single parent home. So it's not about a disparity that is based on race. The disparity is actually coming from the ideology. Your ideology constitutes your environment. And Thomas Sowell and Friedman actually did a report on this back in the 70s about the entropy that government intervention will have on the community. Right. That is the problem. And that's what I call a generational trap, is the ideology. And so once the melanated community, if they're willing to dump the ideology, which is going to have to be done by radical acceptance, and actually put God as number one again, it's not going to change, because everyone else comes from over 160 different countries and excel. Then? Everyone is my target audience that subscribes to the social construct of race. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, but you feel like as long as if young people could ditch this heritage of thinking, then there's more than enough opportunity to set a new trajectory for themselves as individuals.
I mean, really think about it, right? Yeah. Let's be extremely realistic, and I'm gonna paint this vividly. You have people that come from over 160 different countries. They don't know any English usually when they get here, right? Per capita is usually the norm. Also, too, therefore, they have no skills and et cetera. But yet they're able to come to the United States and excel at a higher rate than a person who I consider to be a melanated leftist that subscribes to the social construct of race. How is that possible if America was truly racist? Why are Asians basically excelling and doing better than every demographic in the United States if America is racist? Something's not adding up here. Right. Something's not adding up here.
Well, I think because the narrative is that America's racist, but really only towards black people.
Exactly. And that is that acute victimhood mentality that is fostered by that ideology. Yep.
Yeah. So what would you say will be the number one thing you'll hear back from friends who subscribe to the abstract or the construct of thinking of racism after listening to this? You know, what will they say?
Well, I've been talking to him about this for a while now and kind of listening to his TikTok, and like it's really intrigued me.
Yeah.
And it feels biblically right.
Yeah.
Because the first question I had when he brought this up to me at the first KC he came to was, does the Bible ever mention race? You know, and it really has no category for skin color.
Yeah.
You know, of course, regional, ethnicities, all that, but it doesn't have categories of skin color.
Right.
it's like it acknowledged the fact that there was differences between Sumerians and, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, ethnicities is
so
different than
acknowledging
races,
urban culture or rural culture. I like that you said that. That feels biblically right to me.
Yeah.
You know? So I guess my response would be to myself and other people is, I want to start looking through the lens of just back to, there are no races.
Yeah.
We're all people made in the image of God that all have intrinsic value.
Man.
And
I think that we have this problem in our education system is that we present theories as truths, right? And so that's problematic. And then two is that we don't present the reality that the theory that's presented as truth as having an origin point in somewhat recent history, right? So you going to your example from the 1700s in Germany, that is a very recent starting point of how to view the world, and that for the majority of human history, that's not how people have viewed the world, right?
Exactly.
And so that's important for people to know and to hear. What's the number one criticism you get as you interact with people online?
I will say, I would say the number one criticism that I get from a lot of people is either I hate the melanated community or I'm a sellout for the light-skinned community.
Right.
And or I'm a sellout. So I'm just like, well, no, that can't be true, because I actually, I am the personification, the manifestation of the Freeman's ideology. And so they fought for integration, so I'm going to fight for integration. I also had light-skinned conservative brothers and sisters like Thaddeus Stevens and the Radical Republicans that worked with Harriet Tubman, Sojourner Truth, and Frederick Douglass, and other slave abolitionists. And all through American history, there has been light-skinned Americans who were conservative Christians who are responsible for freeing the oppressed melanated person, also getting rid of black codes, Jim Crow, and desegregating the South.
Right.
Where is the credit for their contributions? And when you look at how beautiful American history is, even though those dark eras, there were still righteous, bold men who were willing to say, I'm not going to be subservient, I'm not going to be complicit, but I'm not going to be intimidated. I'm going to do what God has told me to do, and this is why America is so great. Is because once we get back to Christ, we get to reap what only Christ can offer us. And so this social construct of race, I had to ask a guy today. He was opposition at first, and I said, can you tell me one good thing that race has offered humanity? He couldn't tell me anything. And I said, don't you see that it's dangerous to live through something that isn't true, but also you can't say anything benevolent about it whatsoever.
Right. Yeah. And if it's a good theory, there should be some positive aspect to it, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
if you could identify a group in America who are the most racist, who would you say?
Oh, yeah. I say this a lot ad nauseum, and it's becoming cliche, is that per capita, and this is just according to the data, okay, if you type in the most racist cities in the United States, they're all controlled by Democrat, and it is predominantly melanated people that reside there. Most segregated cities, Democrat, and it's predominantly melanated people who reside there. Cities with the most hate crimes in the United States, controlled by Democrats, and predominantly most melanated people reside there. Now, according to recent data, with the melanated community being 41% of the population, I just like to go up to 45%, right? Just to make the math a little bit more palatable for everyone. Is that 9% now identifies as a Black Hebrew Israelite. Now, the Black Hebrew Israelites are the equivalent of the Triple K. They have the same philosophy. They have the same rhetoric. They like to distort the Bible, twist the Bible, abuse the Bible, the same way as a Triple K.
These guys?
I have one on my Facebook. Go look at my Facebook. He tags me every day.
Every day.
Here's the thing: 9% of the melanated community identifies as that. So that means if you were to say there's 45 million melanated people here in the United States, that's 450,000 people who identify with a hate group. When you look into the recent data from the FBI or some of our other intelligence agencies, they say there's around between 5,000 to 8,000 Triple K members with no influence, no prominence, but yet the biggest hate group right now are from the melanated community, not including the Nation of Islam, not including the radical Black Panther movement, because they have completely changed their philosophy now too. And now racism is so prevalent within the melanated community because it is a cultural norm to raise your children up with unfavorable views of light-skinned Americans, even though you live and reside in a district where it's mostly segregated and the most racist. What do you think that's going to produce? That's a recipe, that's a hotbed for basically blatant racists. And then also add the indoctrination and the radicalization. Now you have a violent, racist, indoctrinated, desensitized person.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
That's fascinating.
So where can people find you?
You can just find me. I'm primarily on TikTok, but you can also find me on Facebook, which will point you to everything that I actually use for social media. So that way you can just come in. We're not about senseless conjecture or baseless claims. I have a high standard for any person that actually comes to my platform, is that I want evidence. Yes, I like receipts for claims, because opinions are very dangerous and misinformed opinions are even more dangerous. But I'm going to tell you, the truth has never divided anyone, only lies.
Yeah, that's good. And what's your handle?
Deron Slater.
Yeah,
Deron.
Yeah, Deron. Yep.
Slater.
Very cool. Good.
Thanks for coming on today, man. That was awesome.
Absolutely.
That's awesome, bro.
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening, everyone. We're back.
Sorry, it's been 5 months.
Has it been 5 months?
Yeah. February 6th. Yeah.
Hey, we're back.
Wow.
Well, I mean, you had things going on.
I did. I had a busy season.
Yeah, you had to be educated.
Amen. 4 weeks, bro. I graduate.
That's great. I'll tell you congratulations in 4 weeks.
I know, right?
Yeah. Good. Torry, thank you, brother.
Yeah, no
Appreciate
problem. Thanks, fellas. You put 'em in.